Hey there, it's Margaret from Let's Learn to Sew, and in today's video I'm going to show you how to use your sewing machine to sew on a button without using a button foot and without using tape. Now I know there's a lot of tutorials out there and videos that show you placing a piece of Scotch tape over your button to hold it in place. However, when I began working for Viking, one of the things that we were taught early on was to encourage our customers to never use tape on their projects. Because what happens is as the needle goes back and forth down through those holes, it's puncturing the tape. Now it's going to get residue on your needle, but what's more damaging is the fact that as it goes back and forth puncturing the tape, little pieces of that tape are going to break off. They can go down through the hole of the button and into your sewing machine. So let's go ahead and let's get started without using a foot and without using tape. So in order to set our machine up, we need to know the distance between the two holes on the button, and you can use your seam gauge to measure it. I know that the distance on this one, because I measured it earlier, is 3 millimeters, so I can set my stitch width to that. If you don't have a way to measure it, I'm going to show you how to do it using your sewing machine needle. Let's go ahead and get the machine set up. The way you set your machine up depends on your sewing machine. My machine has a button stitch, so when I choose the button stitch, it automatically disengages my feed dogs, which means they're not going to move back and forth. It turns off my stitch length, and this is my stitch width. That 3.0 is going to be the distance between the two holes on the button. So if they were larger or smaller, I would just increase my stitch width. If your machine does not have a button stitch, you're going to set it to the zigzag stitch, going to lower your stitch length to 0, set your stitch width for whatever the distance is between the holes on the button. If you're not sure, then we're going to use a sewing machine needle to find out. If you're using your zigzag stitch and when you turn your hand wheel you find that your feed dogs are still coming up and moving, usually there's a lever in the front or the back of the machine and you'll see some little feed dogs, or you'll see it flat. You're just going to move that one way or the other. For mine, flat means that the feed dogs are lowered. I can turn my hand wheel towards me and my feed dogs are not going to move up and down. You'll want to refer to your owner's manual to find out if you need to manually lower your feed dogs. So I've got my regular presser foot off of my machine. I'm just going to use my ankle to hold the button in place, and I'm going to line up the ankle right below the area between the two buttonholes. And I'm going to lower my presser foot. You can move it if you need to. To take my hand wheel, I'm going to turn it towards me, going very slow. As you see, the width is correct. Any reason the needle was coming down and hitting the button, I would either decrease or increase my stitch width. Once you've made sure that your stitch width is correct, you can begin lightly pressing on your presser foot. And if you have an automatic setting, it's going to stop when it needs to. If you don't, you want to go back and forth about 8 times. Once you're finished, if your machine has a tie-off feature, you can go ahead and use that. If not, you're going to want to raise your presser foot and bring your threads to the back. Now this thread tail is from when we started. So off that thread tail, you can turn it over, and my machine automatically knots them. If yours does not, then you're going to want to take your 2 thread tails and tie them in a knot and then clip them. As you can see, we have a nice clean button stitch, and it took a lot less time than it did if you were to have to hand sew them. Once you sew the first one, because your stitch width is already set, the rest of them will take a lot less time. If you have any questions about how to sew a button on using your sewing machine without a button foot, let me know and I'll be happy to help you out.